Councillors? Councillors, thanks. Welcome everybody. I'd like to also welcome those viewers at home who are watching the meeting via the live stream. And if I could ask you all please to be upstanding, and Deputy Mayor Proud, could you please read out the opening prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions, to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. And Councillor Reid, could you please read out the Acknowledgement of Country?
On behalf of the councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. And you can all take your seats. Thanks very much. Without prior approval, any recording of this meeting is prohibited. No action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the city being received. That brings us to item 1, which is the official opening. And ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting of the 2nd of August 2022 open at 6:31 p.m. Attendance and apologies. We do have an apology from Councillor Felicity Farrelly. Approved leave of absence. I have nil. Disclosure of interest from the Planning and Committee meeting. Planning and Development Committee meeting can be found in the agenda of tonight's meeting and displayed on the screen behind me currently. For tonight, Councillor David Lagan has disclosed an impartial interest in item 14.2 as he is the chair of the Walga Metropolitan North Zone Committee. Along those lines, if we are declaring for the Walga item, I will declare that I am State Councillor for Walga. And are there any other councillors who... Councillor Reid?
Yes, thank you. I will declare 14.2 because I sit on a North Zone as a member of this council, please.
Thank you.
And also 12.1 PRS E2 because I live within the Stirling City Centre precinct.
Thank you. Any other disclosures, councillors? No, we're okay. And I'll go on to 5 petitions. 5.1 petition, request to upgrade Boom Lane, Chewett Hill. Councillor Olo, would you like to read the petition, please?
Thank you. The following petition, containing 51 verified signatures, has been received by the City. We, the undersigned, including landowners of properties backing onto Boom Lane between Hector and Cape Street, Chewett Hill, respectfully request that the Council upgrade the Boom Lane way to a safe and presentable environment due to the following reasons. 1, needles and drugs use items have been discarded in the laneway. 2, the laneway is being used as a rubbish dumping ground for unwanted household goods. 3, stolen goods have been discarded. 4, it is obscured from clear view, which gives an advantage to illegal activities. Pardon me. 5, property owners' access is limited. 6, it is holding back new improved constructions. 7, looks very untidy and not presentable. 8, safety for all concerned, especially our school kids and daycare facilities. 9, the church has been robbed more than a few times and unwanted stolen goods have been discarded in the laneway. 10, property owners backing the laneway are ready for development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And 5.2, submission from Canara Road, Westminster. Councillor Sargent, would you like to table this submission, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition from the residents of 14 Canara Road in Westminster. It's a quite a short worded petition, Mr Mayor, so if you allow me, could I just expand on it a tad? Basically, this is a property that doesn't want a street tree. It already has a fully established street tree and the council was asking for a second street tree. Just a bit of background to this, Mr Mayor. In 2016, this 8 units were built in this particular property, and as a part of that development, they had to get a second tree on their verge. Unfortunately, that tree, as a lot of councillors in the room know, died, and 5 years later, the City of Stirling decided it wanted to replace that tree. Unfortunately, after 5 years, the residents have found an additional use for that parking on that verge. So a bit of correspondence between the residents of 14 Canara Road and the City of Stirling resulted, and a bit of correspondence from me too, by the way, resulted in the city saying, no, you must have a tree at that property. So, so the residents, this petition is actually for the residents to not put a tree in, but unfortunately as of 7:30 a.m. on Thursday just gone, the city put in a tree twice as high as me. And I think what disappoints me the most about this entire situation is the city knowing that there is a bit of to and fro from the residents about not having a tree. The city could have at least consulted the residents when they were placing the tree in. They came, they dug a hole, they placed the tree, walked away, and the residents were like, well, at least you could have at least talked to us first. So if anything, this petition should actually be, now that there is a tree, could you come back and talk to us about moving it to a location that everyone can be happy with? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. The new director was excited to hear that. Takes us, Councillors, are there any unverified petitions? If not, I will go on to item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken. Sorry. Can I get a mover and a seconder for the petitions? Move Councillor Rees, seconded Councillor Migdale. Just a quick show of hands, councillors, to accept those. That is unanimous. Thank you. Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice. All public questions from the last council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. Brings us to item 7, public question time. I was about to say we had none, and Mr. Whitehead has come in, and we have a question. So, Mr. Whitehead, I'll ask you to come forward, please. As you come forward, if you could just press on the bottom right-hand corner of that microphone, the button, and the light will come on. And just your name and suburb to start, and then your question, sir.
My name is Robert Whitehead. I ran for a position in the last election, unsuccessfully. I live in Wembley. So my question is to do with privacy. As many of you would know, we have the first multi-level development in Herton Parade in over 30 or 40 years. It's a huge development near the intersection of Jersey Street with Herton Parade, and it's been built on their rear boundary, which is also the rear boundary for where I live in Moondine Drive. So the development is such that the bedroom and the living room of the new development, of some of the units at the rear of the development, are actually on the boundary, and that is opposite where I live. The privacy is to do with the fact that I'm on the second floor of a 3-level building, and at the back of my home there is the master bedroom, a veranda, and behind the veranda the lounge room. That new development contains 7 windows looking directly...
Mr. Whitehead, I'm sorry, I do have to ask you if you're going to ask us a question.
This is the question, thank you.
Thank you.
That development contains many windows, but 7 of which look directly into my back veranda and the back of my home. So what my question is what are the regulations and what are the rules about privacy being compromised by developments such as this one?
And thank you for that question, Mr. Whitehead. Look, I'll ask Mr. Roddick to provide an answer. If you just stay there for a sec, sir. I'm sure it may have to be a general one to start. I don't know if he's familiar with this exact development, but also happy after this, if you want, we can tee up for Mr. Roddick or one of his team to meet with you.
Thank you.
And discuss the actual issues, but I'll get a response first.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Whitehead, for the question. I do remember speaking to you a year ago about a noise issue in terms of the building construction. I can't remember the address of the property. In terms of privacy, from memory, that was a group dwelling development, so the privacy requirements are considered through Volume 1 of the R codes, and there are certain setbacks a development must comply with to, I guess, deemed to comply requirements. When they go inside those setbacks, there's a performance assessment carried out by the officers, and that would have been carried out on this development. I can't remember the specific development, but I'm more than happy to meet up with you and go through the assessment with you. There's definitely privacy is a major consideration in any residential assessment in terms of impact on amenity, and that would have been considered in the assessment. From memory, it was a council decision on that application, so I'm happy to go through the council report, the council assessment, and maybe meet you on site and have a look at exactly what the issue is.
So if we can just make sure we've got your details before you leave, Mr Whitehead, and we'll get in contact.
They're in writing already.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. And could I just ask you, sorry sir, while you're up there, could I just ask you to turn that microphone off? Or just save someone getting up to do it.
The right or the left?
I think it's the same one you pressed before. Perfect. Hey. Oh. Just once. Yep. Thank you. Yep. Good. Thank you very much, sir. We did receive a couple of questions in writing, but they're not in attendance, so they'll form part of the minutes of this meeting with their responses. Item 8, approve applications for leave of absence. Councillor Felicity Farrelly has requested a leave of absence for tonight's meeting. Councillors, are there any other requests? If not, can I have a move and a second to accept that? Move Councillor Ree, seconded Councillor Ola, and just a show of hands. Thank you, and that's unanimous. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 5th of July 2022? Move Councillor Kristovich, seconded Councillor Hatton, and again a show of hands, councillors. Accept those. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Announcements by the presiding member. I do have a couple of quick ones. The first one is to welcome our new director, Mr Andrew Murphy. This is his first council meeting, fresh off the press at Vincent, doing a council meeting there, I think it was last week. So straight into the seat here. Andrew Murphy comes to the City of Stirling with a wealth of knowledge in the infrastructure area and is no stranger to Stirling, having served in that waste area previously quite a few years ago. Since then, he's been a director at Vincent. Certainly against a very talented and large field who applied for the Director of Infrastructure role at Stirling. Council considered and appointed Mr Murphy, and it was a very strong endorsement, recognising some of his key skills, particularly around that sustainability area, which, as you know, is one of the major pillars in our strategic community plan. Andrew, I know the executive team have already welcomed you, and your council now welcomes you. I know they're looking forward to catching up with you and discussing their priorities for the future with you. We wish you all the best for your tenure at the City of Stirling. I know that we're definitely going to benefit from your skill set, and I know that everyone's very much looking forward to working with you, so welcome. And we've certainly thrown you right into it. Obviously with the storms, I'm sure there's been drainage, trees down, some power outages, plenty to keep you busy. And on that note, I just wanted to also, I thought it'd be appropriate to thank the teams. I know councillors would have seen them today too, but I know driving around for different meetings around the city, I saw our teams out everywhere going above and beyond, cleaning stuff up swiftly and just doing the right thing to make the place safe. So well done to all of those people who work out in pretty trying conditions and go that step above and beyond in these sort of times when these storms happen. So well done. And the last quick one is, I'm going off script here, government's going, what's going on? Is to congratulate Councillor Keith Sargent during the council break, during that period, or just before, he was appointed as a Deputy Chair of the Mindarie Regional Council. So congratulations to Councillor Sargent, well done. Back on script. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. Councillor Felicity Farrelly has withdrawn her previous notice of motion as shown on page 9 of the agenda. And we'll now move to the reports, the Planning and Development Committee items. Councillors, do you wish to pull any items out? Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just 12.1 DS2. on page 63, the public art and private land.
Thank you. Councillor Ree?
May I please have 12.1 DS3 rights of way, please?
Sure. Right, councillors, in that case, I will go to item 12.1 DS2, which is a public art and private land policy, page 63. As Chair of the Committee, Councillor Migdale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will move to Bianca Sandri. Councillor Sandri.
It's okay. No,
Councillor.
all good, all good.
Just so councillors know, there was an intent from committee that Councillor Sandri had a small amendment, so I was sort of aware, it was just the timing, so happy for you to move that.
Thank you. So I'll just be moving an alternative motion, which is on the pack and was circulated to councillors on Friday. But ideally, it's to include point 3, which is that the amended local planning policy 6.12, public art and private land, be modified to remove the exemption of developments that are estimated to attract less than 20 people into the locality and all associated references.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded, Councillor Migdale. Is there anyone opposed to that? Councillor Ree, a question, or are you opposed?
I'm opposed to the increasing it from 2 million to 5 million. I do not believe it's necessary, and though it's not written up as a policy, it's in the...
Yeah, so you want to debate it. So I'll go to Councillor Sandri.
Okay, thank you. During debate at committee, I actually raised the point around the $2 to $5 million. In the ideal world, I would like us to be able to have a cash in lieu contribution where developers can actually pay us money for public art, but I accept that the recently endorsed public art strategy by this council does not include that provision anymore. So the reality is that if we apply it on a $2 million proposal, we're only going to get maybe $20 or $40 or $60,000 out of it, which really isn't going to amount to much public art. It would really just be a tokenistic element, whereas when it's a $5 million development or more, it will be far more substantial and something that would be beneficial for the community. So I accept what the officers are saying in the report. However, I would like us to explore the cash and lieu contribution later on in the process, and that might be part of the review of our strategy for something for us to consider. In terms of the point 3 modification, as expressed at committee and very briefly, I feel that no matter how many people a development brings into the actual development, it should still have public art. And I use the example of the data centre on Lord Street. There may be limited employees there and no one probably actually goes there, but it's in a very strategic location and warrants public art. So by us having this clause in the policy would mean that those types of developments would not need public art, where in reality it probably does. So I would rather exclude it from the policy and the officers deal with these types of situations on a case-by-case scenario.
Thank you. Councillor Migdale.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just realised I left my microphone on. I don't really have anything further to add. I concur with Councillor Sandri, probably just to say that I too would like to see developer contributions, and that's how I believe we will arrive at the highest and best outcomes in this instance. And I'd like to see that progressed along the way as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Migdale. Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. I have no problem with 1, 2 or 3, and I would like 4 to actually state that we keep it at 2 million. And the reason I'm saying it, while I take on board it's only 20,000. Well, 20,000 to them, but you get 4 developments of 2 million, that ends up with 80,000, which the ratepayers could do with rather than them paying. So 20,000 can still buy a chair, an art chair. I mean, we just got a couple of art chairs on Stevenson. And I won't talk about that anymore. But it is the basics there. So we still can get things for 20,000. And I think if we're going from 2 million to 5 million, that's a huge big gap. And I think it's totally wrong. So I believe that we should include it in number 4. And if you were going to go from 2, go to 2 to 3. Don't go 2 to 5. I think that is wrong in itself. And I would like the mover and the seconder to consider that, because 20,000, and even though it's written on page 66.
So, Councillor, if you don't mind just sitting down for a sec, what I'll do is I'll get the officers to provide some comment, and then what we can do is test your amendment if you'd like, and we can see if the mover and seconder, is that all right? Mr Roddick or Ms Shears, would you like to provide some comment about the number?
Through you, Mr Mayor, on page 67 of the agenda, the officer's report explains why we have lifted the threshold from 2 million to 5 million, and essentially that is because in discussions with the city's public art officer and a communications team, it was decided that where you have developments of I guess less than 5 million, there's limited benefit or impact of that public art. $2 million, we're talking, a public art contribution of 20,000. Once you take away the artist fees in that, I guess the bit of art you get in on site is I guess limited in terms of its impact. So that's why the threshold was changed. I understand Councillor Ree's comment, and that may be more appropriate where we do charge for cash in lieu, and there he can put funds together as you said, but we don't have a strategy as Councillor Sandri alluded to before. But maybe that is something we can look at too in the future, but not at this current point in time.
Yeah, you can certainly continue. Yep.
Following on from that, yes, I can read that is considered $20,000, which is what I said at the beginning. The staff reckon is insignificant. You can have murals on walls for $20,000, and I mean at the moment we're paying over $20,000 to get the graffiti off it, which we could spend $20,000 on a security guard there to stop them attacking our public art. So I do believe we've got to start somewhere, and if we leave it at 2 million, then let's see what goes on with 20,000 and what we can buy. And when we revise it, maybe then we go to 5. But to go from 2 to 5 million, I think is ridiculous, and it is unfair on the community and our ratepayers, and that they should not be contributing. After all, most of the developments we're having these days are plain grey concrete or black concrete. Let's liven up the neighbourhood.
Yep. Happy to check with the mover and seconder to see if they'd accept that as an amendment.
I'm in a bit of a...
Probably at this stage don't need an answer other than yes or no.
How
Because
about I don't know?
It's not a yes or no.
I'll say no for now. I'm happy. Maybe we do it as an amendment. And
in that case, Councillor Ree would like to move that as an amendment. Does she have a seconder? Councillor Kristovich has seconder. Is there anyone opposed to the amendment? Yeah, question? Happy to take it now.
Thank you. So in the document, I can't find it now, but I recall there was a comment that the city's public art officer suggested that it costs around $20,000 for a concept to be produced for public art. Is that genuinely what it costs? I guess is where I'm going with that.
So I guess what the question, just to clarify, is we've obviously got some logical debate that 20,000 could possibly pay for a mural on the side of a building, but the report uses the example of it's going to pay for a consultant to come up with an idea what it would be. Is Councillor Ree right that 20,000 could pay for a mural on the side of a building? That's what we're trying to ascertain between, yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor, look that could be the case. You could get a mural for 20,000, but that would include the artist fee. So if you look in the policy, there's a guide to how we consider it, and an artist has to be part of that, but you could do that. Look, the policy is proposed or being prepared for advertising. Now, it's probably a lot easier if council do want to change it, you change it now, and then through advertising, we can come back with some further information. I'm more than happy to get the arts officer to come to the next committee and talk to why we set that threshold. But for the purpose of advertising, it doesn't hurt to reduce that threshold down to $2 million if you feel...
Yeah. Is that a follow-up question?
Yeah, so just with the motion, it should be that the threshold is $2 million and above, not set at 2 million, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I don't know whether it's possible to avoid the ongoing nature of the amendment, I am now happy to accept it as part of the motion.
Thank you. So the mover and a seconder have acknowledged that. I'll just check, Mr Blanchard, are we all right if the mover and seconder now accept that as an amendment? We're happy just to proceed as part of the substantive, that number 4 is there. Yep. Yeah, we'll work out the wording as we go through there. So Councillor Ree, it's still, so the amendment's been accepted by the mover and a seconder, so that forms part of the substantive. And I'm happy if you want to continue any debate, or are you happy to leave that now? Yes? Yes? Yeah, you can do, it's part of the the overall thing, but you're welcome to debate the whole item if you'd like to debate it. And that's part of it, so you're welcome to.
Okay, I actually do want to debate the amendment, but I will treat that as the whole item anyway. Yeah, look, I am opposed to number 4. I'm not opposed to the intent of a developer contribution, but I think I think the threshold should be higher. I think it should be back to 5 million. We are trying to encourage and get good development, quality development. $20,000 for a $2 million project, as an example, is a fair bit of money, a fair whack of money. You don't get a very big project or a quality project for $2 million these days. I guess what I'm saying is if we want quality projects and we want to be fair on the developers to produce quality projects, then we shouldn't be thinking at a $2 million threshold. I actually think it's wrong. It's probably bleeding the developers at the low end, and I'd like to see that raised, and I can't actually support that as it is. Thank you. Could that item be put separate?
Yes, it can.
Yes, and maybe the other items too, if necessary, but maybe not.
I don't think the other ones
No,
there's
probably not necessary.
any reason to
No.
prolong it and do the others separately.
Thank you.
Remembering that this is going out to advertising, so obviously receive feedback as well. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to debate this item? If not, Councillor Sandri, you're welcome to close if you'd like.
Just quickly, in terms of the 2 million, I'm still neither here nor there about it, but I accept that it's probably warranted to go after advertising. It's easier for us to increase the threshold after advertising. So I'll support on that premise. What I would like ahead of when we reconsider this after advertising, maybe a list of councils and their public art policies so we can benchmark ourselves to see what their minimum thresholds are. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so councillors, I will put this item, I'll put 1 to 3 as a block, if we can start with that, and I'll ask you now to go to the vote. Yeah, it's up now. Thank you. Councillor Kristovich, have you got yours on? Thank you, and that is unanimous. Councillors, and I'll now go to number 4, and I'll put that item. If you could please vote on just number 4 now. Thank you, councillors, and that is carried with Councillor Hatton and Proud voting against, all other councillors voting for it. There we go. Now I want to go on to item 12.1 DS3, rights of way naming Coastal, Doubleview and Inglewood wards. Been pulled out by Councillor Ree. Councillor Migdale is chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move committee's recommendation on page 85, please.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Proud, thank you. And Councillor Ree, have you got a question or are you opposed? Okay. If I'll go to the mover, Councillor Migdale.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I don't have a lot to add on this item. It was discussed in detail at committee last week, so I can't really see any reason not to accept the status quo. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure what the objection is, but I will hazard a guess and suggest it might be the order that I changed for Doubleview. And could I ask through you to my co-ward if that was the issue?
I think we're about to find out.
Well,
When it
if
goes
I'm
to the
going to
vote.
speak on it, I might as well speak
Was
on...
it, Councillor, was it just this particular one or is there several things that you had an issue with? If I can just ask.
Well, I don't know where my alternative motion is that I was drafted in conjunction with the staff.
No,
and I've got
there's
a
no,
blank-
so right now, let's be
just
clear,
get it
there,
up.
but let's be clear, there is no alternative motion and we're not debating anything. I just asked you quickly if is this a particular one that
there-
you had an issue with?
Yes, there is
Okay.
an alternative motion.
That's not right now, there's not, because the
I don't know
deputy's
where it
debating.
is.
I don't either, but it hasn't even got to that. That's all I'm saying. I just asked you a quick question. Is this the one that's an
Yes.
issue or is it just this one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need from you. Does that help you, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
So my reason for... We're looking at the Doubleview ward, folks, from page 90.
So this is the one, the Seaview Lodge
Yep.
was put by the officers and it got discussed at committee and it was decided Florrie, who from memory was the City of Stirling founding librarian.
Yes. So I changed the order from 3 to 1, 2 stayed the same, and I put the number 1 officer recommendation to number 3. And I'm happy to run through the reasons for that if necessary. I thought Mr. Flory, the information related to him spoke for itself. I mean, I couldn't speak any more highly, and it couldn't be any more directly relevant to the City of Stirling and our libraries. And I put all this in a report when the officers came to us and asked us, this is what we're proposing, what do you think? There was a bit of an inclination for officers, they wanted a female, and there was only one female that was a bit far-stretched, but that's why she's in. The reason I left her at number 2, I didn't put her number 1, is because Nun Lane I didn't think sounded particularly well, doesn't flow particularly well, and no other reason. I'm sure she's an acclaimed artist, etc., and you can see one of her works there. Certainly I don't think it's done the contribution that Mr. Flory has. The reason, coming back from the former Freemasons, and that Freemasons building is still there. It's now named something differently and has been for some decades. Surf Lane. So we're in Doubleview. We're close to the beach, but certainly it doesn't identify the lane with anything to do with coastal or the beach. It's non-related. Surf, we think beach, we think ocean. It just isn't related at all, and they've changed their name anyway. So it's just not related at all. And I considered my alternative, the complete swap around and put Mr. Flory first. I thought that was valid and relevant to Stirling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ree, what's your opposition to this? And I guess you said you've got an alternate, so...
Can the staff find it for me, please?
Yep, so it will become a foreshadowed, is that?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's a procedural?
It's only...
No?
It's a technicality, which has come up with later. With my point was, which Mr. Moore had come back to when I raised the issue, that if you read through it, I can understand the surf and I can understand that. The other two have got nothing to do with our ward, and they might have to do with the City of Stirling. And yes, I don't have a problem with the fact of, people know I support libraries, but the comment made by the officers was that Landgate has a number of requirements that need to be met, including that names are to have had a direct long-term association with the location and made a significant contribution to the area. The city needs to demonstrate to Landgate that this is the case. Now that's from Neil Moore.
Okay, so let's...
So my point is that the other two don't. So what was suggested was that if no one else has any issue with any of the other ones, it's just procedural with Doubleview, that's all, to make them local.
So I understand, but so there's procedurally we've got a few issues here, because this isn't an alternate, because we've got a motion on the table. This is actually a foreshadowed motion, so if you wanted to try it as procedural to hold that one over, you'd be much better, I would think, procedurally. But either way, I do want to clarify, if your debate is regarding Landgate not seeing that the founding father of Stirling Libraries, with the closest library, Scarborough Library, literally 300 metres around the corner, I would say that wouldn't be... It's up to you to debate it, but I can't imagine that would be something Landgate would draw as a problem. If you think Landgate's got a problem with it, I think the procedure would be to endorse it and let Landgate make that decision. But I'm just giving the heads up. I don't see that being an issue. Seaview, this laneway goes parallel to Scarborough Beach Road and probably almost goes down to the library on the other side of the road. Anyway, over to you, Councillor.
But that's my point. So it wasn't, if any of the other councillors wanted to have any comment about any of the other right-of-ways, that's fine. Yeah. All I was saying was that just the A, which shouldn't be an A, it should be a 1, technically under meeting procedures, because it's totally different, because they're each different.
So let's leave the technical meeting procedure stuff up to the governance team. Let's just debate the actual item.
I don't want to get ruled out by some technicality. So all I'm saying is that the rest of it approved, apart from this one little bit. because things like Furpy and some of the other names which we discussed before, and I spoke to the director about it and some of the staff about the fact that, you know, we're getting names like when we did the painting that had nothing to do with that area. And people go, why did you name it Furpy after a beer and stuff like that? And so what I was trying to do...
Well, ease up, don't knock beer, councillor. It's one of my favourite things.
It was a suggested name which some people didn't like the idea of. It's like having called Nun Lane. Some people may not like to be associated with a nun, so I can understand that as well. Although the Nunn family have actually done a lot of really great things in the city of Stirling and the city of Cottesloe. But that's not my point. My point was, even the staff, when I said, well, can't we put up a notice of motion to say that make it aligned with the area? And the consideration by the staff was, it's easier just to take it back and we'll find some better names that are local. And so I've gone with that one and said, well, this is exactly what, if you look at it, it says, Landgate exactly says that they have to have a direct and long-term association. And I think that's the difference. I mean, Percival, if you read, Percival doesn't really have any association with coastal, but the rest of the people do. So when they come to us, we shouldn't, you know, they've got to do the research. I can sit there and say, well, you know, Brombergers down the road have been there since I was a kid, but they've never, and they've been on committees and that, but they don't live here. So, you know, it's up to the staff to find it. What I'm saying is they've got to be local, because I'm not going to go through what we went through with some others and try to explain they've got nothing to do with our area, and they weren't even West Australians, which made it worse. So all I'm saying is that this, and
So if I can,
anyone wants
and while the debate goes on, can I just ask the actual motion goes back on the board, please? Thank you. So continue debating. You're welcome to continue. I just wanted to put this motion up just so I could see it. Thanks. This is the one we're debating, that's all.
Yeah, so that's why technically you've got to sit there and take out just the double view bit.
So what I can give you, the way the meeting's going to proceed, is what we will do is it possible to put these separately so that council approve? And the only reason is the only way, that way, if it doesn't get approved, then we'll have a foreshadowed motion that it's, because you haven't put a procedural, that's all. So what I'm getting at is Councillor Reid has been asked to have a procedural effectively, but it's not going to be considered, and it's a foreshadowed motion. But all we're trying to do, Councillor Reid just wants to bring out this particular right-of-way. So what I'm asking is, can we basically approve the rights-of-way naming and get that done, and then we'll put Councillor Proud's version of it, and if it lapses, then the foreshadowed one comes up. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It does make sense now.
Promise you, it will when it comes.
So
in this head is incredible stuff. When it comes out.
Yeah. Occasionally, Mr. Mayor needs someone to interpret.
Yes. More than occasionally.
So item 1 would be that council endorses the proposed rights of way, and these names be forwarded to Landgate for approval, with the exception of the double view ward rights of way.
That's it. It's like you can read my mind, Mr. Blanchard.
I was regretting the day that you were going to say that, Mr. Mayor. And then 2 would be, as is shown, with the option for council to either vote for or against it.
Thank you.
So 2 would be that the preference order for WU ROW 16012 be reordered as follow.
Well, it was from committee. And that's what I'm trying to get at. We've got a motion on the table, so council has the option to vote for the option on the table. If they don't wish to do it, then there's a foreshadowed motion that it be reconsidered. Yeah. So, councillors.
Mr. Mayor, can I perhaps go through you to ask a question?
Yep.
I'm not sure. Does Councillor Reid want to change the order, or do you want to have a choice of another name to be put forward for us to consider?
Yeah, I think it was to hold over. It was basically, it was to not consider it tonight and then to discuss the names. So, yeah. So, councillors, is there anyone else who'd like to debate this? If not, I'll go to the mover to see if you'd like to close.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And again, I say this was discussed and voted on and unanimously approved at committee, and I cannot understand, I can't see the reasoning behind needing to amend it as being reasonable enough to do so. So I will be voting with committee to accept as per committee's recommendation to us at council this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, it closes. So, councillors, just to be clear, because I've probably confused you all. So we're going to vote on just the naming of the rights of way, excluding the Double View Ward 1 to start with. So that's number one. So I'll ask you to put that one to the vote, please. Thank you, councillors, and that is unanimous. Now, councillors, the next one we're voting on is the Double View right of way, which was discussed at committee, and that was a reordering that was put forward by the Deputy Mayor. So I'll ask you now to vote on this one, noting that if it fails, then we'll discuss Councillor Ree's foreshadowed rec. But it's to discuss, it's not to do this, and it's to discuss other names. No. So I'll ask you now to put this one to the vote. Councillor Perkoff, if you can vote. Thank you, councillor. So that is carried. So the committee's recommendation of that order has carried with all councillors except Councillor Reid voting for it. I would suggest, I don't think I've confused people. I think I've tried to be as clear as I can on that. Remembering that most councillors here were at committee. This was discussed at length, so I'm sure everyone understands what we're doing.
Mr Mayor, the point, my apologies, I think people are confused. I'm just saying that according to Landgate, you've got to have local names. That's what I'm saying.
Councillor, no, so
That
happy
says
to address that. What we did, we put something to the vote that was discussed at committee. As I clarified, it's not our role to discuss what Landgate's decisions are. This goes to Landgate for them to decide. Councillors were then voting. If councillors had voted against it, like yourself, it was so that that naming didn't proceed and new names were discussed. Yes. Yeah. And councillors have made the decision and endorsed the committee recommendation for that naming. Thank you. So I'll now go, that brings us to the end of the Planning and Development Committee, and I will go to the balance of reports to Councillor Migdale, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to move the balance of reports.
Thank you. And seconder, Deputy Mayor Proud. I'll just ask you all to go to the vote, please, for the balance of reports. Yeah. And Olo, Perkoff and Reid. And just as the voting's finishing, thank you to the Foley family. So that went through, just for clarification, councillors and people in the gallery, I'm assuming these are all representatives of the Foley family. One of the namings did include the Foley family, and it did go through as part of that en bloc. So, yeah.
There was a local and deserved to get it.
Yes. That was discussed at committee too. So, yes. Councillor Hatton, we're very slow on the vote tonight, councillors. Thanks. Thank you, and that is unanimous. I don't know if that fits within meeting procedures. If I get to have a chat to the family of the people in between you guys finishing your voting, we probably need to speed it up a little bit. Yeah. So, members of the gallery, please be advised the remainder of the Planning Development Committee recommendations have been adopted by exception resolution. We'll now move on to the direct to council items. Starting with 13.1, the proposed change of the agenda publication time frame. I'm just... Sorry. So, Deputy Mayor, you have a motion?
Option 3.
Moving option 3. Is there a seconder for that motion? Option 3. Councillor Migdale has seconded. Is there anyone opposed to option 3? Councillor Ree. Let's go, councillors. Councillor Proud.
Thank you. Look, I'm not wedded to this at all, and it's certainly not ditch dying stuff. However,
Come on, say it for us. Come on, we haven't heard it for all. Say it.
it's mine. This has been going anecdotally since 1980, in the 80s. That's 40 years. There hasn't been a problem. There's quite a few pros that have been mentioned in the report. You've all read it. I'm not going to go through them. And there's a few cons as well, and I think the cons far outweigh the pros. My main concern is that agenda review, before we get an agenda, and perhaps the new councillors don't know the full breadth of the progress of an item that goes through a committee and council, some 14 days prior, or 13 days prior, it has to go to, well, it has to get through to the director of the business unit, the governance, then it goes to agenda review, and that's where it gets discussed. That's quite a bit of a process. So quite often, items don't meet the agenda, even though it's 2 weeks out, and you would wonder why. 2 weeks is 14 days, I mean, please. However, there's a real process for that to get on, so sometimes items have to be left off an agenda to actually get to the next month's agenda if we're talking committee. Hence, what it does do is take out a day of preparation time for officers to do the report to get to the agenda that we determine matters on. We are reducing that by 1 day. Does that matter? Well, it matters in the sense that officers are then rushed. They're doing many more tasks than doing agenda reports for us. You know, half the city is out, you know, picking up trees off the road right now. So they've got many other tasks to do as well as reports for agenda. I don't want to take that day from them. I don't want officers stressed and perhaps missing out detail. They're human and they make mistakes. We are leaving it open for them to make more mistakes or make a mistake, because they make none at the moment, right? I don't see shortening it does anything. So, okay, residents could get it a day early if it was available on the Thursday, and certainly councillors could as well. What am I going to do with an extra day? I won't look at the agenda, perhaps on Friday, mainly Saturday, and if I've got any queries or questions or whatever, I'll get through them on the weekend, send them to the relevant business unit for a response. I still have plenty of time. The Thursday, the extra day, is not going to make any difference to me personally. It seemingly hasn't made any difference to the councillors of however many there has been since the 80s. It hasn't warranted bringing it forward. I'm not sure of the value. I can only see the detriment. So I say that with the kindest of intentions. I don't know, I think it was Councillor Farrelly that brought notice of motion this. I'm not sure of her reasonings, but a reason, you know, maybe it's about time management. Hey, we're all really busy. We're all flat chat. Just ask any one of us what we've got on for the rest of the week, and I couldn't tell you. I'd just give them my diary and say, go through it. Much like yours, only a bit less than yours, Mr. Mayor. So I don't see any value from this. I don't see changing it, disturbing officers' regular routine of what they've got and what they've got to do. I see it as a detriment only, and that's why I'm putting forward the status quo option 3. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go to Councillor Migdale as seconder, if she'd like to speak. And as she stands up to speak, I would just like to clarify, because Councillor Farrelly obviously isn't here. I just wanted to note that in her, when she put the motion forward, she was clear. The intent was to have the time to discuss with officers before the weekend. That was her intent.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got to say, I concur with Councillor Proud, Deputy Mayor Proud, because the 1 day just will, I can't see how that's going to translate as making much of a value add. It's just not going to make that much of a difference to us. I just can't see the value in it. There's still plenty of time, regardless of whether we change this or don't change it, to confer with officers should one require additional information. So, you know, again, I think it does put a little bit more pressure on officers. I need to understand the value proposition as it stands from the report. I can't see a value proposition. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're all very much used to what we're used to. We're in a routine of how we work. So who it stands to win from a change in this instance? So unless a councillor would like to speak to that reasoning, I would like to keep things as is. Thanks.
And here is the reasoning, Councillor Ree.
Thank
And
you.
then I have both of you. Yeah.
I'm going to foreshadow option 1, please.
Noted.
Because, number 1,
Noted? Yep.
it's a trial. So, if we can't have a trial. Number 2, I think that just because we've always played on the road doesn't mean we continue to play on the road to get run over. So, what we've always do doesn't necessarily work. Number 3, Mr Mayor, I think you've made a lot of changes since you've been Mayor, so one could argue some people might say you shouldn't make any changes at all. I know. 4, I think that if we're looking at local people, which sometimes around the table we're not looking and listening to local people, that this makes it very local, which I think
Councillor,
councillors would like.
Councillor, just sit down for a sec. Councillor Perkoff, your point of order.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, that we don't listen to the general public when we're sitting here.
Thank you. Councillor, I think that's a fair point of order. Councillor Ree, I think that's probably, I get it's your argument, but you've got to be careful saying stuff like that because it's not true. Councillors do listen to the general
That's right.
public.
If we don't listen to local people, like local right-of-ways, my apologies, exactly the same thing. We listen to people who want local right-of-ways called after things. Exactly the same as you're not listening to people. I did not say staff make complaints. I never said that. I didn't say staff make mistakes either. I didn't say that either. And I don't think they would. But I wouldn't put a point of order on that, of course.
Stay on track, Councillor.
Oh, I am on track. Believe me, I am. I find it interesting that that you would not want to have 1 day extra. It's only 1 day. You have an executive meeting a week beforehand. A lot of these things you're knowing months and months ahead. I mean, I've got, my women's shed's been on the agenda for 10 years. Still there. So, you know, we know that's coming 1 day.
Technically, it's not on the agenda, Councillor.
Still on my agenda. That's been up for ages. So a lot of these items are not thrown at us. However, there is a lot of things thrown at us at full council meetings that we never get to see. We only find out late Friday. You can't talk to anyone on the weekend. By then, the community have seen it, particularly local people, go ballistic on Monday, and you usually can't find the officer anyway to deal with it. Or if you do find the director, then the director is really busy trying to get ready, and you're trying to get to him and say, can I have this and that in exchange? Or you're trying to get something explained as little as right of ways. But that was confusing. So, time is very important, and as it says, it's only a trial. And I think the staff are more than capable of being able to do this, and I think the local community, if they were allowed to, would actually love the idea of coming in and asking the staff on Friday or asking us questions on Friday to come forward. So I don't think we've got anything to lose. I think it's a really great benefit to the community, and I actually think the staff would actually like it better because it gets them more organised. Plus, if we've got any things that all of a sudden people have got some angst about, it gives them an extra day to sort out whatever's going on. So to me, I think it's a great win-win situation to have option 1 trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On this occasion, I will support Councillor Ree. I do feel that as a board around the table, like we only have 4 business, well, it's not even 4 business days, it's 4 calendar days for us to consider an agenda. And often our agendas are, you know, over 300 pages long. And I think it's only fair that we have an extra day to be able to draft motions and be able to have a discussion with officers around that, because 2 of those 4 days falls on a weekend, which we can't actually have dialogue with the officers with. I also do think there is an element of transparency to this, having an additional day for the general public to also be able to view the agenda, and equally they have an opportunity to contact the city's officers, an extra business day to facilitate that as well. I think that, and I accept that the public having the publication on the Thursday will result in a shortened time frame for officers to prepare minutes and agendas, going from 3 days to 2 days. I apologise for that, but equally we need to, around the table, be able to fully consider the agendas within a timely fashion, and in any board scenario you'd have due time to be able to do that. So I think any day that we can gain, unfortunately, does result in a day lost for the officers, but it is a trial. Let's see how we go. It is for 6 months, so I apologise for those 6 months. It will be fun from January through to July. But anyway, regardless of that, I think this is a good outcome for us to consider, one for ourselves and also for our community as well.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Lagan next, and then I've got Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Councillor Sanders covered a lot of what I was going to talk about, but I recall, or I seem to recall, that there might have been a request similar to this from Mr Wheeler, who often comes to the gallery, and that was around the same sort of thing, transparency, being given enough time to look at the document, study the document, question officers or whatever might be the case. And I would tend to agree. I think the trial on option 1 is a good idea. It might well put pressure on the staff, but I do recall that we had some debate in this new council that we would follow the line that the Minister has pushed about transparency, and I think this does give us time, because there's been a number of occasions where people have come to the gallery and where elected members themselves have said this document has been huge and difficult to digest properly in such a short period of time. This gives us extra time. It also gives us the transparency that we're looking for and we asked for at the start of this council. And I think it's beneficial. Yes, there'll be some issues maybe with timing, but I can see some benefits. I'd support the trial.
Thank you, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Christovich next, and then I have Councillor Thornton.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I would like to propose an option 4, if I can, please.
No, you can't. You can foreshadow another motion.
I'll foreshadow another motion, because I hear what people say now. Under option 1, which is being proposed, we're talking about committee and council reports.
So just to be clear, option 3 is proposed. Option 1 is
option
a foreshadow.
Option 3.
Yep.
So I'd like to foreshadow an option 4, being that it's actually council agendas that come a day earlier, not committee, because the committees. No, the option 2 says the committee reports and council. But the thing is that we have a committee meeting. The council meeting is not till a week after the last committee meeting. So we've got plenty of time from a committee meeting to a council meeting to consult, to do whatever we need to do, to even make changes, anything else we need to do. So I don't think the committee reports need to come a day earlier. But if it's the council agenda that you want to get a day earlier, that makes sense. Because the committee, you've got plenty of time to look at. And you've got plenty of time to in between the decision made to a council meeting to make appropriate changes if you need to, or consult the community or do whatever else you need to do. So it doesn't change the stress and pressure on the officers to do reports for the committees, and most of the committee reports make up a substantial amount of the council agenda anyway, so there won't be that much more pressure on the officers to change the council agenda to a day earlier, and then it meets the objective of what the other councillors around the table have said. And I think that would be the more intelligent way to go if we do want to try a proposal of a change. So I'd like to put that as a consideration for councillors around the table.
So what I will do is I'll ask Mr Blanchard just to provide some comment, noting that I do just want to make it clear that right now there's 3 options in the paper. One of the options, option 3, is the actual motion. There's a foreshadowed option 1. Statistically, for all those to fail and a magic motion 4 appear, would probably not happen, just to give you the heads up. Mr Blanchard.
I'll put it on there anyway.
Yeah, just Mr Blanchard.
I'm trusting.
No, I'll get some comment from Mr Blanchard.
Look, essentially what Councillor Kristovich is proposing is option 1 anyway. We'd prefer that than an option 4 of just council. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Councillor,
If they want to do committees.
he does that to me sometimes too, Councillor Kristovich. Councillor Thornton, it's over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. One thing I don't think that we've mentioned so far that I think is really important to support option 1 is that we need to look at people's different people's working circumstances and family circumstances. If you're working full time and have a family, you've got to work over the weekend as well as having that 4 days in total. So I think that 1 extra day can make a huge difference to somebody who has quite a full working life. And I think we need to consider all circumstances in deciding on this option.
Sure. Thanks. I have Councillor Ferrante next and then Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I wanted to further elaborate on the smart comments from Councillor Kristovich and further heighten it even the next level up. And the key periods...
This is going to be good.
Yeah, it is. The key periods we do have are usually Easter and Christmas, where we have 500,000 pages to read in 2 days. So if we are going to amend something and look at that great idea that was forecast by Councillor Kristovich, that we look at those key days as options where there is a longer period lead-in, because they are bigger pieces that we do need to make and pump through, and I think that should be something that could be considered in the mix of things.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this report was missing one thing for me, right? It talks about comparisons to other councils. It talks about options 1, 2 and 3. But what it doesn't talk about, and there's been a lot of talk around the room, is about the disadvantage it has on staff, right? I don't think there's anyone in the room that understands the work of a governance officer completely. I really don't. We're not here day in, day out. We don't see the work that gets involved in governance officers. So what I would like to ask is for a bit more information from perhaps Mr Blanchard on how these agendas are formed, what the officers actually end up doing day in, day out, so council has an informed decision about doing these options on the board, so we understand if there are real pressures on the staff.
Thank you. So I will go to Mr Blanchard, noting that Councillor Sargent is on top of the Christmas card list now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, there is a detailed process with at the start of each year when councillors set the calendar for the meetings for the year, we send off our report deadline dates by which we need to have the reports into the draft agenda. The directors themselves have an agenda deadline date that's before that, so they can review the reports. But once the reports are in, my team has a look at the reports, picks up all the things that need to be discussed and changed, and that's discussed at an agenda settlement meeting roughly 1 week out from the committee. That gives the officers time to consider probably 2 things. 1, are there any obvious improvements to the report? And 2, does the report strategically match what council's vision is for the city and reflect what the whole of the organisation thinks rather than just the viewpoint of one business unit? Those changes are made and then the agenda is published on the Friday. I don't even begin to understand the work of a governance officer myself. I sometimes wonder how they do it, but I can tell you this, whatever council resolves tonight, we'll make it happen.
Oh, look at that. Councillor Sargent, back over to you.
I got really nothing more to say, but all I can say is obviously this crunches not just the governance staff, but obviously the directorates and managers, and so us making what we think is a simple decision here today actually affects the organisation from top down. So I probably will be supporting status quo. From the sounds of the room, it probably won't get up, but I'm happy with a Friday. I don't look at agendas to the weekend anyway, and I don't see that changing with me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, is it just a question?
Yeah, question. I just wanted to ask, I just wanted to ask governance, how is option 1, where it says committee and council agendas published on a Thursday, the same as what I recommended, that only council meetings be published on a Thursday and committee meetings be left as they are?
So I can answer that. Mr Blanchard was trying to help you in the fact that they are comfortable if they're going to do council, they might as well do the committee a day early. They are able to do it, and that you've got no chance of your motion getting up because it doesn't exist right now. Can I also just add, these guys are incredible athletes. They can do anything. Mr Blanchard and Mr Morby here on the weekend ran 50 kilometres through trails. They train for this sort of stuff and they can do it. I now have Councillor Hatton.
Yeah, look, mostly I think everything's been said. I do support option 1, but I do want to pay my respect to the officers and all the good work they do, and they obviously have a big task ahead to get the publication by the due time. However, since I've been on council, I have noted that half a business day for me with a full-time job, or near to, and other councillors too, half a business day on that Monday doesn't allow me time to really do what I need to do as a councillor. So all due respect to the officers' task, but we don't have people around us to help us to make phone calls, to do the emails. We have to do it ourselves, and half a day is just not appropriate. The extra 1 day would also allow me to have so the public get notification that 1 day earlier. People can get through to me. I can get back to my my constituents over the weekend and have a fair discussion, fair debate, and it just allows a lot better comfort zone for me for it to go to option 1 for the trial. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Councillor Sandri, a question?
Just a question. With option 1, does that mean that all the schedules are just pushed 1 day forward? So, for example, I just need to get clarity. For example, let's say a planning report is due to director on X day. It is now 1 day before. The directors' meetings is now 1 day before. We're only talking about 1 day, just to clarify.
I think that's the intent. Some of the mechanics that sits down at officer level would probably be worked out afterwards, but that would be the intent.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor, and that's the reason why we've suggested a significant lead time. We've got all our deadline dates set for this year. That will give us time to review the process. It probably is time for a review, and it may only be 1 day. It may be that we don't change some of the deadlines, but we will look at that in detail and look at how that we can operationally make this happen. But it gives us time to reflect on that question.
With
Follow up?
Yep, sorry. And I only ask that because I know that when I used to work in local government, if an applicant missed the deadline of a council report meeting, they had to wait, infinite amount of time for it to go onto an agenda. So if we're only talking about 1 day, then I think that's okay. Okay, thanks.
Sure. And look, councillors, we've had substantial debate on this, so we'll go to Councillor Proud and ask if you wish to close or if you're happy to make a quick close.
I will.
Your time's almost up.
If we get the agenda on Friday lunchtime, we could still talk to officers if we so choose. If we were to read the agenda for those that are working, I understand they can't, but I don't understand if they're working, they wouldn't be able to access it any earlier anyway because they're working. I get the working thing, trust me.
But I think I just want to be clear though, the point is that if it came out on Thursday night, they would be able to look at it Thursday night and have Friday to discuss it or be able to get on the phone. That was their point.
If they weren't at work, that's fair enough. It's in my many years since 2007 of being here, I've never not been answered by the Tuesday, no matter when I've put a query in prior to Tuesday, have I had an answer. I've had answers on Friday night, on Saturday, on the weekend, or weekend evenings, or Monday or Tuesday. I have never not had a response by the time it gets to the Tuesday meeting. And do remember here, this is a KPI of the CEO, to actually make sure and councillors are informed, have enough information to make informed determination decisions on the Tuesday. So officers certainly excel in that regard. I will repeat, I wouldn't read it any earlier. I'm not sure our residents, I don't know what value it would give our residents either to be reading it a day early if it was available. I think if this 6-month trial goes through, so it changes, and people will adjust, but then in 6 months' time, if it's not seen to work, or be as smooth, or a couple of tweaks need to happen, or they don't happen in time because everything's a day early, I don't know that it's really going to make a lot of difference to community. And I haven't rushed out and done a bit of a survey on any residents, because most of them, you know, they're only interested in certain items that pertain to them when they come up. And just to reiterate also, you know, business unit managers are doing the reports with information from their team. They meet with their director. Directors meet, and I think with the business unit managers as well, with the executive for agenda review. This all has to be restructured a day earlier. And I know the governance team can jump through hoops, but we don't actually need them to prove it all the time. And I don't want to see any more hair dye have to be bought for all the extra grey hairs. I'm trying.
I felt like she was looking at me then.
We could change the council meeting to Wednesday and still have the agendas on Friday.
And with
Maybe
that, it closes debate. So I will now put this. So note, councillors, the first motion we are putting is that there is no change. So if you want the change, you are voting against. If you want the status quo, you are voting for the motion. Noticing there's a foreshadowed motion. Is everyone clear? So if you're voting for the status quo. I'll put it to the vote. I even confused myself then and pressed the wrong one. Okay, councillors, everyone has voted and that motion is lost. Noticing that Councillor Kristovich voted for motion 4. No, just so we've noted that there's a foreshadowed motion. So we're now voting on that motion, moved by Councillor Ree. I'll get a second at Councillor Sandri. I think we've had sufficient debate on this. So this is voting for a trial for the change to get it a day earlier. All right, let's try this one. Thank you, councillors. And that motion is carried with councillors Proud and Sargent voting against, other councillors voting for. I don't know if you can claim it, councillor. Yeah, it worked. We got there. Thank you, councillors. Hey, let's keep it in perspective. If it's a trial that makes it easier for those who struggle with the timeframes, then I can't see it being a bad thing for council. So we'll now go to item 14, notice of motions for consideration. The first one of those, item 14.1, notice of motion by myself regarding the Justice of the Peace meeting room. Is there a mover of a motion, councillors? Deputy Mayor.
I'll move the alternative on page 134.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Ree. Is there anyone opposed to that? Councillor Sandri. Just a question. Off you go.
Thank you. My question is $60,000 really what we have to spend to fix this issue?
Yes.
Can I ask, and I know this is unusual because you're in the chair, but it is your notice of motion. Can you give some background as to how it arrived from your point of view?
Sure. So my understanding of this is several years ago, the city conducted or had a consultant group Jacobs, I believe, do a report on security and safety, and it went across all realms of the City of Stirling in terms of the situations our officers are put in with their frontline community work, right through to building, just looking at things like the SEPTED requirements, citizenship ceremonies, things where we have public ceremonies and there's not enough rigour around knowing who's there, etc. As part of that, there were some issues that were brought up in the main administration building regarding taking people's details down. And one of the things as a sort of side product that came out of that eventually was the JP room was around near the lifts and it was in a back room. And whilst it was a secure room, and I know there's some JP, Councillor Proud, obviously in the room, who's dealt with it, there wasn't that passive surveillance of the people. So, and remembering that quite often, many different people seek out a JP. Quite often they want some privacy, so it's a balance between getting that privacy but also having that passive surveillance. The other issue was people actually going through to the lift area and actually being found in the building because there was no sort of gate there. So part of it, the unintended consequence was putting the sliding doors in meant that obviously we still got issues because there's no public toilets. The JPs were moved to a passive surveillance area, but it was almost like an afterthought once all the reception, with all due respect officers, once the admin and then the back rooms were done and the pod was fixed up, the JPs have ended up, as many of you saw as we walked through that main front building, on the front area. And whilst it provides a passive surveillance, recognising that many people who need a JP is probably not at the best moment of their life, or they don't want everyone to know about it. It's, I think, and talking to the JPs, there's not enough basically privacy around it. So this is about, they've now trialled it in the back room, the back corner to see if that's better. It is, but this is about putting a proper room in place with proper surveillance and ensuring there's a level of privacy. So it's a glass screening and doors and all that sort of stuff. So that whilst there's some passive surveillance, people also feel like they're not being listened to by people waiting for their development application.
No, and I appreciate that. Thank you. That's helpful. My second question is, part 2 refers to a $60,000 expenditure allocated from savings in the 2022-23 Capital Works program. We only just endorsed the budget 2 weeks ago. How can we suggest we've already got savings? And why hasn't it been considered as part of the mid-year budget review? I'm not being facetious. It's a genuine question. Yep. Because ordinarily we're told matters like these, and by the way, I fully support JPs and what they do in terms of their work for our community. And I don't have an issue with the expenditure per se, but I want to know why it's not being considered at mid-year budget and how we can suggest that we've got savings.
Sure. Mr. Kellick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, you're absolutely correct. We've only just commenced this year's Capital Works program. Certainly, we've got a couple of projects on hold at the moment. We may be able to source some savings from those projects if and when they don't progress, but also the fallback position is to deal with it at mid-year review. But at this stage, we believe we can find $60,000 in the Capital Works program, notwithstanding that we're looking at doing the work early in 2023.
So my next question is, what projects are on hold? So this is the debacle that goes in. It's like a cyclical thing, right? So the councillors aren't aware of what projects are on hold. Is it one of the projects in the ward? Is it something that we've been dealing with in order to promote something that goes forward? Can we confirm the projects that are on hold are not, I mean, every project is of value. What are they? That's
sure.
going
Mr.
to be
Kelly?
filling that.
Yep. Absolutely. The two projects I'm referring to are the RCB project and the Hammersley Public Golf Course project, which are both on hold due to current market conditions.
But those,
okay,
sorry, Mr.
yeah.
Aren't those out of reserve?
So let's be clear. That's not where the savings can come from, though, for those two projects. I would think it'd be fair to say no projects in this financial year are probably on hold yet because we've only just started the financial year this month. So I don't think the intent is to try to hold projects or get this money. I think the intent was to decide if this is a priority for council and then sort out if the funds have to come through mid-year budget review through savings.
So can I ask, Mr. Mayor, should option 2 be worded in a way where it says in that council...
Let me get Ms Hawkins to provide some information.
Thank you.
I get what you're saying.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Sandry. It's a good question. We had noted about savings because the first point is that council endorsed for the works to happen. And so we needed to then have funding to make that happen. We would look more broadly across the organisation for savings through the mid-year review. If Mr Kellick is saying that the works won't happen until early in the next calendar year, then yes, if we change that second motion to say that it considers, that council considers it, The two just need to go together, because if you're endorsing for it to happen, we must find the money. So it's either you consider the works and we consider it a budget. That's why we've got that, and we would need to find the money if you were endorsing that first recommendation. Does that make sense?
So if we can just change the wording before we have any more discussion, because it's not debating at the moment, it's just questions around that. So let's just, if we sort that out and everyone's happy, then unless anyone's opposed.
Yeah, and if the budget doesn't get adopted, the works will happen.
If there's going to be questions all around, then we'll go to debate. So, okay. Is yours just a question, Councillor too? So while this is getting done, let's go to those questions. So Councillor Thornton, you've got a question?
Yeah, I've just got a question around where the actual services are based. Are we better off having JPs at our local libraries where most people would frequent rather than
They are at other centres throughout the city as well.
So we need one here for the extra foot traffic?
Yes,
So-
it's, the usage numbers are quite significant, yeah. Yeah, and the hours are different, yeah.
My question was that with regard to the council considers up to 60,000. My concern would be if we're going to have more of a structure that it wasn't see-through glass.
No, it's not see-through glass.
Well, you said glass. I'm just
Yeah.
saying not see-through.
Sure.
That's all.
No, it is. It's a proper, frosted. All right, so now that that's... Look, I think everyone's quite happy with the intent. It wasn't meant to be tricky. I think it doesn't matter if we endorse it or consider it. As long as consider it means it'll happen if the money's there. Yeah. Then I think it doesn't affect the motion or the intent of the motion. Everyone's happy with that. I will put that. Thanks, councillors. That's unanimous. We'll go on to 14.2, proposed notice of motion. Councillor Keith Sargent, Wolga membership. Councillor Sargent. Controversial.
I will move the recommendation, which is just to call for a further report to council. I do wish to emphasise the bit at the end that says, and provide alternative options for advocacy and support that may be relevant to the City of Stirling, because it wasn't really mentioned in the brief.
Sure. Councillor Migdale's already seconding over there. Is anyone opposed to this? If not, Councillor Lagan?
No, I'm not opposed. I just wanted to make a comment if I could. Okay. Then I'll oppose to be able to make.
That's it. All right. How about I chair the meeting? There's a lot of chairs down there. Is it a quick comment, Councillor Lagan? I'll indulge you as chair of the North Zone.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it was only just to comment that this exercise has been undertaken by other councils, and there's some history around this. I don't disagree with the concept of seeking information.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and noted, there may already be some information out there. I'm sure the governance team, between doing the reports early, will do that. So I will now put that motion. Lucky they've been training, eh? And that motion is carried with Councillor Lagan against. I'll go on to item 14.3, the proposed notice of motion. Councillor Migdale, tree planting along Flinders.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and with your indulgence, I actually have a slight amendment to the notice of motion I'd like to move on the board.
It's your motion.
I'm going to read it out nice and slowly for governance. That a report be presented to council.
You can go this bit a bit quicker, I think.
Outlining the costs and implications of planting trees along Flinders Street, Yokine, between Wanneroo Road and Morley Drive by the end of August 2022.
30 days.
It's on.
It's a day early.
It's a report.
Let me just check.
It is just for the
In fairness,
report.
it's just about planting trees.
That is
so I
it.
can't see it can be. Mr Murphy said He would have done that in 2 weeks back at Vincent, no problem. Mr Murphy.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question. And we chatted about this earlier, so we can certainly bring back something high level with an idea of cost. It won't be the perfect article. I think if I was to be honest, September would be nice, a couple more weeks, and that would be in plenty of time for mid-year budget review. So if we could get that extra couple of weeks, that'd be good. And remember, it's my second day, so I was hoping for a little bit of leeway. But we can certainly turn around something pretty quick.
They're testing you. They're testing you. Councillor Migdale.
Happy to make it by in the second week in September, which is in line with my birthday. So trees on Flinders Street for my birthday.
So let's
would be
write September
appropriate.
in there and get this done. Is there a seconder anywhere for Flinders Street? Councillor Ferranti has seconded. And I'll put that motion unless there is anyone opposed. No. Good. And we've just got one to go. Councillor Ree, have you voted? Councillor Ree, thank you. That's unanimous. Councillors, there's an item 14.4 now, a proposed notice of motion for Councillor Joe Ferranti, Dog Swamp Bridge.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation, thank you, for the leading town of Pisa to be reviewed by the public and so forth.
Sure, and I'm sure Councillor Migdale is seconding that one. And is anyone opposed to that? If not, yeah. You can ask a quick question.
How is the consultation going to go?
How's the consultation?
So the report says, let's consult with user groups. How are we going to do that? Is it just the user groups? Do we know them? Are we going to do the residents that live around there? You know, what?
That's the intent's clear. It's been. I know the ward council have discussed it with the officers. Many of you may recall Mr Brown coming to elected general meetings every year asking about Dog Swamp. This is one of the things it's referring to. The intent is that it would be fairly widely consulted and find out what is valuable to the community around there before its money is expended. And that can be worked out. I'm comfortable that can be worked out afterwards. So, I will. Let's put this motion, councillors. That's unanimous. Thanks, councillors. The next one, proposed notice of motion, Councillor Migdale, 14.5, to close Mazel Lane, Mount Lawley to traffic. Councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is just that a report be presented to council on the proposal. This isn't to close Mazel Lane, it's just for a report, councillors. I need a seconder first, but I'll move the notice of motion on the board.
Right. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ferranti. Is anyone opposed to this? Councillor Ree, is there a question? Sure. Over to you.
Back to me. Thank you, Mr Mayor. So, basically, in this instance, I don't know how...
Save it for debate, councillors.
Thanks, councillor. I don't know how familiar you all are with Field Street, Memorial Lane, Mazel Lane, and there's one other lane, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Anyway, in Mount Lawley, but I suggest to you that the best way to get your head around this is to actually go there and take a look yourselves. So, effectively, there's a development on Field Street, which we all know is currently being built, and adjacent to that development, there is a small lane that runs alongside it called Mazel Lane. So, going back a couple of years, the developer requested access to upgrade that laneway to beautify it because on the ground floor level of their development, some of the apartments are going to be within a metre or 2 metres of where there would be cars driving past, potentially. The thing is, Memorial Lane is the lane where the rubbish trucks go, it's where emergency vehicles, should there be a need for them, would go. There's no infrastructure running under Mazel Lane. It's really degraded and currently closed off at the moment as part of the development that's occurring, for which I believe they have a permit to do so. So the thing is, I've had years of receiving several emails a week from residents of Memorial Lane about crime and antisocial behaviour taking place in that lane. So whilst when the application was lodged for this development, council said no, we're not going to allow you to close that off to pedestrian traffic. We're going to leave it as a thoroughfare. It seems to me that it serves very little purpose being a thoroughfare because most of the cars are going down Memorial Lane, which links the two streets parallel to each other. And this particular laneway, degraded as it is really serving very little purpose. Now we have a situation where a developer is prepared to put up funding, to put money where their mouth is and say, hey, if we can put bollards up at the end of this lane and not have the cars running up and down, we will go above and beyond and we will dig deep into our pockets and put some paving and plant some trees, which we love, and green it up and put some seats and make it all pretty. We understand that it is yours, meaning the City of Stirling's. However, we will prepare it to a high level to encourage safety, security. They're looking at putting lighting in and all manner of things that, guess what, the city residents don't have to pay for. And it will provide another level. It will be available for the utilisation of everybody. So effectively, whilst it's a laneway, it's public open space. It can be utilised as public open space. Anyway, end of the day, Stirling said no from a planning perspective to this. The developer has come back, this is now the third time, and I feel that the best thing for us to do is to put it to the residents, because it's the residents who stand to be most affected by whatever transpires here. That is why I'm requesting that a report comes back to us, and off the back of that report, we can then potentially go out to public consultation and let our residents decide how best to utilise this laneway. I can't see any other way of reaching the highest and best outcome than to consult with our local residents. So I hope you do support this request for a report to come back to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just seek some clarification, just for my own edification, but you mentioned about from planning, was it planning or engineering, possibly? Engineering, sorry.
Yep.
And also, could I just have clarification? Again, I don't know the answer to this, but you mentioned about consulting. Has any consultation already occurred to see if any residents around there would be amenable to this? No, okay, thanks. I have seconded by Councillor Ferrante.
Mr Mayor, I don't have anything else to add apart from the fact we just need to seek the clarification it doesn't go past Rookwood Street, and it needs to be amended because Maceville Lane continues on the other side of Rookwood Street and that is unaffected. Yep. It's just where the development area is at the moment. Thank you.
Not, yeah. Yeah, that's right. The intent's there, I think, by putting that in. No? Okay.
Mr Mayor, can it
Between,
just be
so after that put... No,
between Memorial and Rookwood, please.
Yep.
Memorial and Rookwood. Memorial and Rookwood. Okay, thank you. And we now go to Councillor Reid.
Should be between Memorial and Rookwood only, so it's defined.
It's clear.
I'm opposed it, and I will oppose it for a number of reasons. One is that our staff, our hard-working staff, are already going to have one more extra day to do the agenda. Getting them to do a report that can be considered unnecessary at this stage. It is only just been started, the development. We don't even know at this stage whether or not vehicles are going to be issued or not. There was already a whole lot of people commented about access to the road, not wanting the development, full stop. Why are we sitting there closing a road when we don't even know, when the staff approved it with a road, and if you look at the bottom of page 141, the city has previously advised the applicant that it does not support full or partial closure of the road.
Sorry, I'll just do your point of clarification. Councillors, can I just have some quiet?
We are not proposing to close the road. It's public consultation, clearly.
Okay, no, I'm happy with Councillor Reid's debate. In fairness, it's the report be presented on closing the lane. I think I think we're okay with it. Councillor Ree.
Would have thought that I was.
Just get back on with
being
it.
on the same page as me.
Just get back on with it.
Thank you very much. The actual reasons for the motion are that the development has begun and the developer has approached the city. The developer approached the city
Councillors, please, over there.
to consider closing Mazel Lane to vehicular traffic and upgrading the laneway, right? So this is actually saying that they want, the report is to close the road and for the city to upgrade the laneway, which would mean at our cost. That's number one. Number two...
let's not go that far.
Literally reading it, like everyone else would read it. Now, this was controversial anyway, but the thing is, the proposed modifications do not form part of the development approval, right? Which is true. So the people that actually went to the development approval to start with, which was argy-bargy anyway, this is what's happened. We should respect the officers, and the developers should be respecting the officers, and which is an issue with the amount of time developers come backwards and forwards to our officers anyway, to actually sit there and say, let's close the road. I think it's far too early to do it, to close the road or even consider it. Wait till 6 months, wait till it's finished. And then there has to be a reason why the officers said that at the beginning. And don't forget, around this table, the councillors agreed to it, like it is. So let's respect that, wait until it's actually built, and then have a look at it, and then we can get a report on, is it working, do people don't want it, or whatever. But at this precise moment in time, it's too early. Who's going to make a comment? Probably the developers will make a comment because then they can use it to their advantage. You know, and why should developers be coming to us anyway? Is that the role of councillors and staff to be meandering to everything developers want? We're trying to get $20,000 out of them to put a pretty seat in a park is difficult. So to me, I don't see that whether or not in the future it may or may not be, but the officer said right at the beginning, no. The approval from this council was no. Let's wait till it's finished and then see what the community says. I think we're preempting it too far.
Thanks,
so I would
Councillor.
not support the motion at this time,
Sure.
but maybe later.
Is there anyone else who'd like to debate this motion? Councillor Kristovich, you've got
to ask some questions, really. I mean, in terms of obviously closing the road / laneway, have we had petitions? Have we had any representation to council from the community about closing this particular laneway?
From the developer, I believe, but I'll get Mr. Rodich to comment.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kristovich, it's only through the approach of the developer. He has put 3 concepts to the city. One is to upgrade the surface of the laneway, not our standard bitumen. The second is to allow partial pedestrianisation of the laneway, and the third concept is full pedestrianisation. So they're the concepts. So what this notice of motion talks about is a report coming back to council on those 3 concepts. At that point, should council have an appetite to entertain any of those, then at that stage, that decision, community consultation would then occur. Community consultation is not going to occur but now, before that report's done. The next report is just on those 3 concepts and to provide council with information regarding those and a recommendation.
So just a further question. So you mentioned 3 concepts, but that motion talks about nothing other than closing the road. It doesn't say anything about upgrading it or upgrading it for vehicles or, you know, the other 2 options.
So, and Councillor Kristovich would like a 4th option as well. Mr. Roddy, do you want to clarify that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, look, the notice of motion generally talks about what the applicant's trying to achieve, and closing the laneway to vehicle traffic is, I guess, their key goal as part of their proposal, but they did propose 3 concepts as part of that. Now, of course, with this notice of motion, we haven't got time to go through those details for this report, but the next report will look at all of those, and this notice of motion can be considered at that time.
I understand, but just to confirm, no one in the community is actually asking for this?
The developer.
Other than the developer?
No,
Right.
correct. Not at this stage. Councillor Sandri. Councillor Meadow, you'll get your chance in a minute. Because you
Can I ask the mover and seconder on the back of what Mr. Rodich said, whether there's consideration to change to be closed vehicle traffic to consider options of this laneway? Because it's a very specific wording, and there's a suggestion
So,
of concept.
so you'd like an amendment that a report be presented to council on options for Mazel Lane, Mount Lawley between Memorial Lane and Rockwood Street, and leave out the rest of it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly approve this and thank Councillor Sandri for the clarification she's added.
That I think, and if Migdal and Ferranti would accept that, then that becomes part of the substantive. I think that is a proposal. As options, so get the proposal out. Options for, I think that's a good.
Clarification, please.
Yes, you can.
Under our, and I know that you know everything, so I'm just learning. But just
Happy
under our
to
meeting procedure guidelines, I didn't think you could actually change it because it was a proposed notice of motions. Notice of motions you actually can't change because they're not a recommendation, they're a notice of motion.
So I can clarify, it's Councillor Migdal's motion, she can do whatever she likes. I'm quite happy, it doesn't change the intent at all. I think it clarifies the intent to leave it open. So if a councillor puts forward a notice of motion, it's your notice of motion, so you get to put the motion forward. And this is an amendment that's been accepted by both of them, which doesn't significantly change the intent, so I'm quite happy with it. I'll go back through my little white book that Mr Morby gave me. Councillor Sandri's got over there, well written, thank you. Another great thing from our governance officers, and I'm quite comfortable with that. So that is done. Is there anyone who'd like to debate this? If not, I'll ask Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, just a question through you, two officers. Might there be an occasion where this would set a precedent, even in that current form, for developers to believe that the City of Stirling's open for some moving around on, especially rights of way?
No. But there may be a perception, but that we can't judge on perception, but it doesn't set a precedent.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is if we did hypothetically go forward and move for an option that we've already been told has been fairly healthily pushed by a developer, is that going to suggest to other developers that this is the way to go?
Well, and I don't think, so I understand what you're asking. I don't think officers can answer that. I think the intent of this is clear, and the only precedent that would be set is that council considers options that improve a laneway, and if consultation agrees with it after that and the community want it, the council supports it. Like, I don't think there's any intent to rush anything through, and I think...
Yep, just further to that then, so let's, in today's environment, this could happen, the development falls over, we've agreed for the laneway to have something done to it. Are we then left carrying the work to do the laneway?
No, I don't. I think it's a long way off. I think they're hypotheticals that can't be answered. This is... Let's be... Yeah, but let's be very clear. No one is doing anything now. All this is councillors responding to a request in a sensible, measured way to say, let's investigate, rather than say, no, let's investigate options and see if the community want it. That's all it is. I don't think it's... Let's not make it something it's not. We're not going in and developing a laneway tomorrow. Councillor McDowell, I'll go to you to close debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you all for the clarification you've provided. Again, to be very clear, this laneway will remain in the ownership of the City of Stirling. It is not being sold, it is not going to be privatised, there's no closures, it's open to all and sundry. We have a developer whose apartments are the only residents on Mazel Lane who will have any effect by what occurs on Mazel Lane. They are the only ones who'll be affected. So in this instance, if a developer chooses to put their hand in their pocket and make a city asset look more beautiful and plant substantial trees and green the space and put lighting in, why would we not consider this? There's just absolutely no reason that I can think of. Now, again, as per Mr Rodich's comments on this, the proposal of this developer was not just to close it off to vehicular traffic. There were 3 options presented, one of which was still to allow vehicular traffic, and 2 were differing degrees of upgrades, okay? Wait till you see the report, marinate on the information, go and have a drive, have a look, see what you see, and then make a decision on this. I don't feel that in this instance, as another councillor had alluded to the fact that council should make this decision. No, we represent our residents. They should make this decision, and it should be an informed decision, and they deserve access to a report that is an informed report so as to make a decision on this. Okay, so I hope you do support this. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, that closes debate with the amended motion. Move Councillor Meekdale, seconded Councillor Ferranti. Put that to the vote. Thank you, councillors, and that is carried, noting that Councillor Ree is voting against it. Councillors, do you have any proposed notice of motions you'd like to raise for future meetings? I'll go to no indications. I'll go to item 15, questions by members of which due notice has been given. I have nil. Item 16, new business of an urgent nature. Councillors, we do have an item of an urgent nature this evening. I'll hand over to Acting CEO Ms Hawkins to outline.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Actually, I'd like to ask Mr Murphy just to provide a brief summary on this matter. Thanks.
Mr Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, CEO. Just to say the report's been...
Councillors, can we listen to this one, thanks? Sorry, Mr Murphy. Councillor
okay.
Ree, just if we can just listen to this late item, please.
Yeah,
Mr.
just
Murphy.
to say the report's been prepared as a result of some concerns that were brought to elected members by members of the community. I'd like to thank governance who turned the report around very quickly. And the particular concerns are about communication from Watercorp in relation to the Pipes for Perth project. So I think Councillor Sandry would like to give some further background on the issue, if that's okay, Mayor.
Yeah, sure. And just again, for some further background, Councillor Sandry approached me about a notice of motion. I suggested this method, considering it wasn't about a report, it was about a letter, and given the timeframes of the notice of motion would actually make it obsolete by the time it came back in future, I thought it was worth Councillor Sandry just highlighting this issue. So, Councillor Sandry, if you'd just like to talk to this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I do apologise that it is a late item, but it only came to my attention yesterday. Mount Lawley and Inglewood are currently undergoing the Pipes for Perth program through Beaufort Street. They've somewhat completed stage 1, although this is all anecdotal, so this is why we're writing a letter. It is behind schedule. They're in stage 2. That appears to be behind schedule as well. And unfortunately, Inglewood, which I still don't understand, is stage 3, which means that the Inglewood night markets, which are supposed to commence in September, it looks like the Pipes of Perth program may go beyond November, which means it starts to implicate their viability and their options around the markets. I believe they currently have an application in with the City of Stirling for the markets, but again, the community can't seem to get a straight answer out of Watercorp, and they're seeking our assistance to be able to assist the community on that. I would also like to just put on the record that Water Corporation, anecdotally through community members, have not been keeping small businesses and the community up to date in terms of their programming. They're not advising when they're closing roads. They're closing roads when they feel that they need to without prior warning. They are not putting in the effective detour routes. It is very unsafe at Clifton and Central Avenue, which is already a very unsafe intersection. It is banked up night and evening, and there is no reasonable traffic management. So I would also ask the city to look into that as well, please. Sure. So moved, Councillor Sandry. I'm sure Councillor Lagan will second that. Look, and Mr Murphy, I'm sure, has a lot of experience with this, seeing it in Vincent, and I'm sure has probably had the similar experiences. And I know certainly, and I know some of the councillors over that way, every time I go out there, it's just crickets. And you just think, you know, why, it's just frustrating. Cordoning off areas and it's leaving them for weeks. And it's, yeah. So I'm happy to put that as an urgent light. It is for me to write letters to get action, simple as that. So I'll put that to the vote. No option for. Councillor Lagan.
And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And thanks to the team for turning that around to get that through. Item 17, matters behind closed doors. We have nil. That brings us to item 18, which is closure of the meeting. I now declare the meeting closed at 8:09. It went through on block as part of the P&D. Noting we're finished at 8:19. That's how we roll here in Stirling, Mr. Murphy. Goodbye to the viewers at home, and thanks to those members of the gallery.